have you ever thought about whether or not there are benefits to actually being a simp? There's probably a good chance that you have been a simp at one point in your life, or you may be recognizing right now that you are actually in the land of simpitude. Obviously, this is not a place where you want to stay, because at the end of the day, simping is bad. But does that mean that there are not positive benefits from going through the area of your life where you may have been a simp? I'm going to go over 5 positive lessons that you can learn from your time as a simp in the dating game. The first positive lesson you can learn from being a simp is that you will have run hundreds of simulations to get data on what does not work. And I think this is important because there's that famous story of Thomas Edison coming up with the light bulb, and it took him like 10,000 tries before he finally figured out what was going to actually work. And somebody asked him like, well, were you upset by the fact that it took you always 10,000 tries? And he said, no, I learned 9,999 ways that this is not going to work. So inevitably what I'm saying is that when you are simping, you are at the time unknowingly doing a lot of things that are just not gonna work. And that's where I was when I first started my whole dating advice journey. Was the first book I wrote was because I had many women that I had crushes on that just went to crap. And these are women that I was there for, to hear about them banging other guys or telling me how much of a girlfriend I was more so than a guy friend, and spending money on outings with them and wasn't getting, and I was doing all this stuff in hopes that these women would fall for me. And once I realized that stuff wasn't working, I actually wrote the book, No Girls For You, The Ultimate Guide to Losing the Girl of Your Dreams, where it's basically a chapter by chapter synopsis of me simping out and then explaining to myself why that wasn't working, okay? So the benefit for me for that was I got to make a book, I got to become a coach for you guys to where you guys can learn from me what not to do, but more importantly for your own simping, if you are able to put your ego aside and recognize that, hey, I've been doing a lot for all these women that I've had crushes on that didn't actually like me back, never said yes to dates, never wanted to reciprocate in any kind of way, then you will, in effect, have in your arsenal a bunch of examples of things that you should no longer do. And a lot of guys don't have that. A lot of guys don't have something to look back at and say, oh, okay, I remember I did this thing, so let me not do that again. And it's just as important to learn what to do to attract women as it is to recognize what things are not going to work. So as you get older and you start to date more and more women, you'll start to be more recognizing of what things do not work as well, and you'll do less of those things, which will actually make you a more effective dater in the long run. So that's the first benefit. The second positive lesson from being a simp is that you have a large pool of women to test new techniques on. If you're like most simps, you probably don't have just one woman that you are going after in hopes that she would eventually fall for you. You probably have a decent amount of women. We could say you probably have like 5 or 6 women that you probably be like, if I could, make any one of these women agree to a date with me or say yes, I'd be happy. It could be any one of them, okay? So at the point where you start learning more so the things that women actually find attractive and what actually makes them want to stay around with you, well, surprisingly, let's say you have these 5 or 6 women that you've had crushes on forever, okay? And none of them have agreed to go out with you. Well, now you already know that at this point, there's no bad thing that can happen from asking these women out or testing out new techniques that you've learned. At best, they'll say, oh, no, I just see you as a friend. I don't want to do whatever. But if you're able to learn certain things like how to ask women out, how to talk to them in a flirty way, how not to be so available for all the time, et cetera, you now have women that are close enough to you that they see you as a close friend or a viable person in their life to where you can actually test some of these things out. And this isn't to say that you're going to be able to date any of them or all of them, but A, you might, and also just being able to test out certain things that just to see if they work on women in general will actually be beneficial to your dating life. Perfect example. So one of the early things that I learned when I was coming out of the simpness of the time in my life was that making yourself less available will usually result in women reaching out to you. And I'd never tried this before. And so I had quite a few women friends at that time. And so I tested it out. I would choose like one of my women friends. And instead of being the guy that I was before, where I was trying to text them and call them all the time, I'd go like 2, maybe 3 days without reaching out to them. And inevitably, within that 2 to 3 day time span, I'd have one of them reach out. Hey, I haven't heard from you. What's going on? Are you mad at me? Is everything okay? Now, again, this might not have been a woman that necessarily wanted to date me, but it did show the proof that if I kind of just back away a little bit, I can let them have the time to come to me. And that actually helped out immensely when I started dating a lot and dating more and with being a better dater, because instead of being that guy that thought I got to rush in, I got to call them all the time, I got to text them all the time, I got to see them every day, I was able to take a woman out, have a good time, and then fall back a bit and give her the space she needed to think about me and to come to me and say, hey, I had a great time. When am I going to see you again? And it happened time after time after time. But I wouldn't have even thought about, I wouldn't have been able to have the confidence to practice that on new women if I hadn't been able to practice first on the women I had been simping with up this whole time, okay? So if you've been simping, you probably have a good amount of female friends that you can start testing some of these things on here and there. And who knows, you might get it to where you actually are able to get one of these women to go on a date with you. I've had several female friends of mine that I was able to ask on at least a date or two, simply because, again, it was just me testing out some stuff. I had simped, I had these women that were around me. I didn't think I'd ever have a shot at being able to get a date with them, but I wanted to try some new stuff to see if maybe possibly it would have an effect. And in some cases it did, okay? So use that to your advantage. The third positive lesson from being a simp is that for later relationships, you know that a woman begging you for something isn't going to keep her around. And this is for you guys that have up to this point been trying to beg women to spend time with you, or trying to give them extra attention, or trying to spend money on them in hopes they hang out with you. Chances are you've been doing this, and if you're recognizing it hasn't worked. You've been spending money on women, hoping that if you spend enough money on a date or throw enough money at a woman, that she's going to want to be with you all the time and eventually be your girlfriend. And if it hasn't worked, that's actually a good thing, because if you're able to recognize that that's not a technique that works, then fast forward to when you start getting into relationships with women that do want you, those women are still going to test you. They're still going to, try to beg for you to get them something or buy them something, or, say, I want to go to this fancy place and, my previous boyfriend took me, why won't you, yada, yada, yada. But because you've already been through the stage of your life where you did the things that this woman's now asking of you, and at no time did those things result in these previous women having a higher attraction for you. Now, when newer women try it, you'll be able to be like, well, hey, go to that guy. If you want somebody to spend money on you and your ex is spending more money on you, then go to that guy. Because I don't think he's better than me, but I mean, he's your ex, so clearly there's a reason for that. But if you think he's better, then go ahead. And you'll be so unmoved and unbothered by silly requests that sometimes women will throw out there, that the women that you are now going to be dealing with will actually realize that you're not going to be the guy that falls for that. They're going to respect it more, and more often than not, they're going to actually say, okay, I was being silly, my bad, you're a good guy, I'll, stop doing these little silly tests or whatever, okay? So in short, you simping right now, as bad as it may seem, you're getting evidence that the things you're doing aren't working. That the amount of times you're on a phone with a woman where you're trying to be her psychologist or whatever, the times that you're spending all this money on her and none of the stuff's working, it's not going to work for new women, but by you having gone through it, you'll know that enough to know that you won't be doing that for the women that you are now attracting, if that makes sense. The fourth positive lesson to learn from being a simp is that you've had hours of training on how to talk to women about anything else other than sex, which will actually be a great thing for your relationship. Now, the caveat is this, is that you do want to learn how to be more flirty and how to have those kind of sexual conversations that women are actually going to want to see from you in order to get that, A, you find them sexually attractive, and B, that you know how to move in that sexual realm. So it's not to say that you don't want to learn that stuff, but once you get past the sex stuff, the majority of your conversations with women are going to be about everyday things, about, what she's going through, about her job, about you trying to see a movie together, et cetera, okay? And so because you've been simping, chances are you probably haven't been really pushing the sexual side of stuff, which again, is something you definitely need to learn how to do, and you can learn about that from some of the programs at my website, introvertdatingsuccess.com. But you have been practicing for years on how to have normal, everyday conversations with women. And most men don't even get to that point. Like, a lot of men get so nervous, they can't even do that. So the fact that you've been able to, you've had crushes on all these women, and as a means of trying to keep them around, aside from, trying to bribe them and stuff like that, you've also been able to be in their good graces. You've made friendships with them to where you could regularly talk to them about just like regular stuff. Those are actually skills that you're going to need in long-term relationships. The major difference between a long-term relationship with the woman and a friendship is really the sex part. But in terms of the conversations you're going to have with both sides of that, it's going to be about the same. So you've had diligent practice to where you're going to seem like a very good communicator with anybody you get with. And once you add that little sexual component, it's going to be off the charts. All right. So that's the fourth thing. And finally, the fifth positive lesson to learn from being a simp is that the actual things you're doing for these women, like, for example, surprising them with gifts, or thinking about how you can make their day and listening to them when they're having a bad day or when they need to talk about something. These are all actually great things that women want. Women would love to be able to meet a guy that's able to do all these things. It's just that they want to do that with men that they're attracted to. And so the part for you that's going to be hard is going to be getting to a point where you're comfortable enough with yourself to be able to kind of push some of those sexual boundaries and kind of, do more of those take charge things, like asking women on dates, planning the dates that you're going to go on, making those first moves for the kisses and the hugs and leading things to the bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the things that you do that are a little bit extra, women love that. It's just you can't do those extra things with women that are not attracted to you. So when you first meet a woman, you don't want to be throwing out all these great things that you do because they haven't earned that yet. And you need to really see if this woman is one that has any kind of bubbling attraction for you, is saying yes to dates, is agreeing to spend time with you solo. If they're not doing those things, then don't try to do these extra things that are great for women that are interested in you and are great for relationships, okay? But with that said, unfortunately, if you're in the simp mode now or have been in the simp mode, then you're probably already doing these things already. So take note of the ways that you try to treat these women special. These aren't the women that deserve that because they're not actually wanting you, but still keep note of those things that you're doing. Because again, women that are deserving of that are going to be so happy when you're that guy that's doing that. And you're getting a lot of practice doing that now as a simp, and we want to get you out of the simp area, but that doesn't mean that those things that you're doing are bad. It just means you got to find women that actually are going to be appreciative of that and then respond in kind, okay? But all that to say, so all these things that you can learn from while you're in the simp phase, these are actually positives that when you find the right woman are going to be great things, okay? And again, the fact that you're running all these scenarios, you're having time to really go through what's not working, this is ultimately going to benefit you in the long run for when you find that one woman that truly, truly is going to be there for you. If you found the info in this episode to be helpful, please show your support by clicking on the tip jar tab, the link of which can be found at the website and in the description below. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment on this episode and catch new episodes right here on YouTube or wherever podcasts can be found. In the meantime, be sure to check out these other episodes so you too can learn to date as your introverted self while still getting your precious alone time. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.